Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Karmin, the one you guys all requested. Pulses. Well, this is awkward. See, I initially didn't want to cover this album, and for good reason. For one, the reviews from other critical outlets did not look anything close to good, and believe it or not, I don't like giving out negative reviews. It's the same sort of logic that normally keeps me from reviewing true genre train wrecks if I don't have anything new to say about them. Except, well, you know, for country, but that's only because I'm the only country music critic on YouTube, and look, somebody has to cover them. But with Karmin, it's a little bit more complicated because, like me, they got their start on YouTube as an upstart duo making pop videos and covers. Now, I'll admit I didn't watch the majority of their material on their channel. I never subscribed to them. But I knew they had an upbeat sensibility and a certain self-deprecating goofiness about them that did redeem some of their material. But on the other hand, the stuff I did hear from them wasn't great, and I wasn't really a fan of either Broken Hearted or Hello, the former which struck me as a Katy Perry wannabe track, and the latter which bungled a chord progression that sounded way too much like Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana to be ignored or exactly forgivable. And thus, when I heard they got a major label deal and were dropping a new album with plenty of pop collaborators, I felt a little bit uneasy about covering Karmin with my typical brand of harsh reviewing style, especially when the early buzz on this album was less than complimentary. On the one hand, look, YouTube's a community, and the odds that they might see my review in some form is higher than most, and in the spirit of that community, any review I drop might hit a little bit closer to home, and I don't want to do that. Now, on the other hand, I've got my integrity as a critic, and just because they started out in the same platform doesn't mean they don't deserve the same level of analysis or scrutiny. And thus, with all of that in mind, I cautiously picked up Pulses and steeled myself for whatever might come out on this album. How is it? Well, you know what? Jeez. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take the middle path. In most situations, I'd step up with a certain brand of blunt honesty, but for a pop act just starting out, I think that a different sort of review might be more helpful here, both to the band and to the label executives partially responsible for all this. So what I'm gonna be doing, I'm gonna be revisiting my 3 points to making a strong pop debut album that I originally coined back in my K review that nobody seemed to care about except me. Okay, cool? All right. Let's get this started. Now, the first step is presentation and brand establishment, defining those unique elements that make the band different and special from the rest of the people in the pop landscape. Now, fortunately for us, Karmin already did some of this with their work on YouTube, but this can be a double-edged sword because fans of that original material and style might not like it if the label's pushing you in a more market-friendly direction. YouTube doesn't always translate to the mainstream charts or mainstream radio. And look, that definitely happened on this album, both in the sound and in the larger direction, which feels like it could easily be slotted into mainstream radio without a second thought. Now, that's not a bad thing on its surface, sure, but it doesn't exactly lend the band a lot of unique personality. Amy Heidemann is clearly the main face of the band, and while she's got a lot of presence and she is a good singer, there's not a lot of staying power or raw potency behind her lyrics to get me really emotionally invested. Previously, I branded Karmin's music as trying to replicate the Katy Perry formula, but Heidemann reminds me a lot more of Nicki Minaj's recent pop success, where there's a lot of cartoonish energy and flash, but not a lot behind it. And the instrumentation really doesn't help matters, as a lot of it sounds mashed together from disparate sources, from the heavier trap-inspired percussion to the fuzzy dubstep-inspired backing synths in some songs, to the hand claps to the retro disco vibe of I Want It All. And none of it feels remotely cohesive, a hodgepodge of elements that might have worked in modern pop and not the pieces that would have actively helped Karmin stand out in today's scene. Now this takes us to the second step, to ensure that the artist is placed in the best possible light on this album. Now this normally just applies to the production, which is not great on this album. The synth lines are overcrowded, there are way too many extraneous squeals and sound effects that add nothing other than annoyance to the song. The auto-tune is vocal production that just feels unnecessary here. And can we have a moratorium on elements like gang vocals and pitch shifting attempting to sound imposing? Because they don't in today's pop scene. The issue here is tone. The instrumentation often feels abrasive and rough, and sure, it somewhat complements Heidemann's Nicki Minaj-esque style of rapping, but it doesn't complement her singing very well, and it really can come across as quite obnoxious, which would be fine if it was remotely convincing or lyrically compelling or backed with some real potent raw energy behind it, but it's not. What's worse is that there are more sentimental songs like Neon Love and Tidal Wave on this album that I thought worked a lot better, mostly because they felt very real and came from emotionally compelling sentiments, like the wistfulness of a doomed hookup at a nightclub, or feeling like you're losing control in the insane whirlwind of rising stardom. That's emotionally compelling stuff, and I thought Karmin did a good job with them. But now we have our third and final element, and that's establishing unique personality, the things that the critics will pinpoint. And you know what? I'll say this, Karmin does have some real personality and they have some real charisma, and their lyrics do reflect a more varied and interesting eclectic form of songwriting that I did appreciate. But this is where we run to an unfortunate problem. I have no idea how seriously I should be taking some of these songs. Amy's harsher delivery and the instrumentation at least seems to, they want us to be taking some of these songs somewhat seriously. But the lyrics are often so goofy and exaggerated that, you know, I find it hard to buy. Take the lead single a cappella. The lyrics are focused on marrying a rich guy and then dumping some hapless loser who doesn't measure up, but the lyrical wordplay feels imported from a bad Lonely Island song, and I just can't take it seriously or humorously. The same goes for Drifter, a song that tries to glorify moving from partner to partner and has some pretty ridiculous lyrics, but then Nick Nooner tries to lampshade it all with, I don't really care if you call me corny. Dude, I review country music. This isn't corny, it's sad. And I get the striking feeling that was not your underlying subtextual intention. Or take What's in It for Me, a song that tries to go for the anti-corporate sentiment that occasionally comes up in pop music and completely fails because its sound and the sound and lyrics of this entire album, they feel crowdsourced and written by committee, which if you look at the writing credits, they were. And normally I don't have a problem with that. That's how pop music gets made, and it's been made like that for decades. Except it feels so strikingly disingenuous when Karmin are trying and failing to protest that system. But you know what? You know what Karmin reminds me of the most with this album? If you go back about 40 years to the 1970s, there was a band called Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show. They weren't a band I exactly liked, but they started a career with a lot of silly, irreverent comedy songs until the mid-70s, where they transformed themselves into a smooth AM soft rock country group that was so earnestly corny that they didn't even sound like the same band. What didn't work was the band wasn't playing to their strengths. At their best, they were loose and silly and had a bit of earnest charm, and they didn't take themselves that seriously. And honestly, I see a lot of pretty direct parallels with Karmin's career progression here. Now, it's not as bad as Dr. Hook, because you can still see hints of the humor, even if it's not exactly my thing, and there are elements of the earnestness in their presentation that can work. I like the disco vibe by One It All. Neon Love and Tidal Wave, they both felt heartfelt, and that worked for me. And as ridiculous as Puppet and Try Me On and Hate to Love You were, I can see their appeal even if I wasn't exactly a fan. But the instrumentation feels stripped of a lot of Karmin's unique sound and loose energy. This album feels a little bit soulless in the end, and unfortunately rather forgettable. Except of course for the obnoxious bits that I just wish I could forget. In the end, I'm giving this album a 5 out of 10. Not exactly good, but not worthless either. And while it's a shame that too many debut albums fell into the same track that Karmin did here, I honestly hope that their sophomore album shows a little bit more flavor that brought them from YouTube in the first place. Because at least with that sophomore album, if this one does well, it might give them a little bit more creative freedom. At least I hope so. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Fans of Karmin, as I'm sure some of you will come in and be quite annoyed with this review, look, I'd want them to do well. Like, I want everyone coming up from YouTube to do well. This is new media. I like to see new media do well, and I honestly hope they have more of the band has more of a chance to pursue more unique directions coming up in the future. If there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming up in which you'd like me to cover, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. But until then, I'm Mark, and I'll see you next time.